Good evening and welcome back to RitterCast. My name is Vin. I am here with Chris to my left.
Hey, what's up?
Lee to my slightly more left.
Someone say across. Hey, what's up?
Everything is left to me. My right is my extreme left. Tonight's topic. Do we care to know what that is?
Yeah.
Right.
I would certainly like to know.
An envelope here.
Open that envelope.
Let's see what it is.
I'm nervous.
What could it be?
Tonight's topic is ghost stories.
Spooky.
So let's go around. We'll each
Spooked.
take turns telling what some would call real life ghost stories. So things that have happened to us that we may be able to credit to some sort of specter.
Paranormal entity.
Yes.
It was my favorite asylum film.
Would anybody like to go first? I do not want to go.
I volunteer Leland.
Perfect. Great. Good,
Okay.
good, good.
I actually luckily have a story.
Oh, excellent.
Okay. So you might have heard this story before.
By the way, audience, he's gesturing to me.
I'm gesturing to Chris.
You wouldn't know that
Chris,
because this
you
is
might,
an audio format.
Chris, you might have heard this story before.
Yes.
I don't know about you, Vin. So this was about 4 years ago. I was, at home. It was a nice summer. I was hanging around. My family was going away on a cruise, and I was prepping to go to Texas the following week, so I did not go with them. So I had like a week to spare in between where I was like just had the house to myself, which was pretty cool. And I was spending most of the day like leading. They were all packing, and I'm like drawing and watching A Haunting because I have that shit on DVD. It's great. And I was
The original?
The original, yeah, the original one,
So
the
like the
2005.
50s?
2005. What? No,
The
A
50s.
Haunting TV show, the Discovery Channel show.
Oh.
Not
right,
the movie.
The Haunting.
No,
That's
A
what that's
Haunting,
called.
like the
Gotcha.
Discovery Channel
Okay,
show.
I'm
yes.
sorry, my mistake.
In the world, between
Continue.
the world we see and the things we fear, there are
Right.
doors.
I recall.
Yes.
I do now. Yep.
And so I was watching that all day, and I'm like, it's just a fun show. I like it a lot. I love the awful dramatizations. And so I was watching that all day, and that night I decided to, hang out. My friend and I went on a drive, and we were just talking about like ghosts and stuff. And he used to live in a haunted house. He would hear like loud screeching coming from his basement. When he
As you do.
When
Sounds
he was
about right.
downstairs playing the drums, he would hear like someone next to him whispering in his ear.
What did they say to him?
They in his brother's voice, they said, "Mike, help me." And then his brother was upstairs in his room playing video games when that happened.
Interesting. All right.
And
okay.
so eventually he moved out of that. This house was in Old Bridge, which is on an Indian burial ground, the whole town. So he then moved out of that house, and he lives in Homedale now. And he was, he's consistently worried about whatever it was following him, as one does. So that night I was like, because I was watching A Haunting, I'm obviously the expert on that sort of thing. I'm like,
You're
dude,
already spooked.
yeah, and I was like, dude, you should like bless your house to make sure nothing comes there. And
Yeah.
and he's like, I don't know how to do that. I'm like, I don't either, but you know who does?
Get some
Misty.
sage.
Oh, I thought you were
knows
going to
how.
say a haunting.
No.
They
No,
know.
my friend Misty knows how to do that because she's into the occult and all that stuff, and she knows her shit. So I called her up, and we're talking about it, and then about a minute into the call, it starts dropping out, like in and out, and like it'll like she'll talk for a second, and it'll just go to like dead silence, not even like white noise, just complete silence. But the phone's still connected, so I'm like, that's weird. And then this goes on for like a good like minute or so, and then drops out completely. Dead silence for about 15 seconds, and then there's another sound which sounds akin to a human being whispering. And it was rather unsettling, and it sounded like a human man whispering, and you couldn't really understand what they're saying. It's too low, and it was too like garbled. But there was a voice of some sort. And then that happens for about a solid 30 seconds, and Mike and I are just looking at each other, and we're like, that's a little weird. And then it stops for about 2 seconds, and there's a very loud screech, and then the phone disconnects.
And the screech was in the phone.
In the phone.
Coming from the phone.
And then I look over at Mike. He's white as a sheet. He says that is the exact sound that used to come from his basement. He does not know Misty. They were not fucking with me. This was on my phone. It was not on his phone. So I'm like, that is terrifying.
So you cursed yourself.
Maybe,
The story
yeah.
is
Lee
curses
I
himself.
got myself involved in ghost stuff. That was the story.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's like one of the creepiest things to ever happen to me.
Follow-up, has anything happened to him
That's what I was
or
going
you
to say.
since?
Was there a
No.
sequel?
No, nothing
to that?
happened since. But I know, like,
That's
he
a
did not
fun
go home
idea.
that. He was like, I'm not going. He's like, I'm not sleeping at home tonight. Fuck that.
Yeah. So, but other than that, he hasn't had anything.
Not that I know of.
Paranormal.
But he also doesn't live at that house anymore. He lives like at school.
Okay. All right. Maybe when he moves back.
Maybe.
it'll be
You never know.
ready and waiting.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's one of the creepiest things to ever happen to
That's
me.
pretty creepy.
Yeah.
All right, that's an
Yeah.
8.5. On the
Hey,
creepy
thanks.
scale.
Thanks for that rating.
Because other people were there with you
Yeah.
to experience.
Yeah.
It
And
was
I-
more
I
just the
forgot
fact.
what
It was the fact that he was like, "That's what came from my basement." I'm like, if it was from his phone, I'd be like, "Oh, you're screwing with me." But I'm like, "This is my phone. I'm not doing this.
Right.
What is happening?"
That sounds like the closing line of like a short story or like a creepypasta. You know what I mean? Like, that was
The
noise-
sounds that came
the
from
sound
his
that came from my
basement.
basement, and then sudden end.
The end.
Yeah.
I like
Yeah.
that. Yeah.
Mhm.
We can work on that later.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
We'll all write
maybe
it
a little
together.
derivative, but I'll give you.
Well, my favorite story is the day of all the blood. So it can't get much more.
Scariest part is that man was you.
The man was you, unless you're
Unless you're a lady, and then it was a lady, and you forgot this has happened.
Right.
All right, good story. Do we have anything to follow up, Chris? I mean, I do have a story, but I don't mind waiting.
So okay, I do actually. You know what? I am gonna throw in a weird story, a weird like ghost-like paranormal story that I have experienced. I have another story actually that I do want to tell later on. We'll get to that later.
All right.
So this first one actually is I was much younger at the time. I was probably about 9 years old, I want to say. And I was on vacation with my family in the Catskill Mountains of New York State. And now anyone who is familiar with the area knows that it's relatively spooky. It's a creepy place. I actually remember that there's a quote from H.P. Lovecraft that they use on the Catskills website, promoting their like Halloween spooktacular, about how creepy the Catskills are.
Do you know what the quote is?
You know what? Wish I looked it up. Couldn't tell you, but
If you'd like to find out, look it up yourself.
Go on the Catskills website.
Go visit.
This is why we have
Sponsored by
Google. Yeah.
Catskills Travel.
Yeah.
Skills.
Yeah.
I never could say it correctly. Is it
Catskills.
Catskills?
Catskills.
Cat like this.
It's
cat
like
has
Catskills.
Oh.
Catskills.
Catskills.
The Catskills.
But you
Okay.
say like Catskills.
Catskills. You know what really messed me up with that?
What?
Do you remember the series My Side of the Mountain and The Far Side of the Mountain? There were two
Never heard
series
of that.
2 books.
No.
It took place there, but it was written in the way that they spoke in like the dialect of New York State. Right, ketchup is spelled strangely.
Yeah.
Catskills.
Catsup,
Right.
like
yeah.
a fucking
Right,
weirdo.
like cat soup is almost how it was. Yeah.
Ew.
And then Catskills,
Yeah.
Catskills was spelled strangely to the point where I didn't know how to say it until this very moment. So sorry.
Right.
But
There you
ahead.
go.
Continue.
Catskills.
Catskills.
So, I was a young boy at the time. So a lot of this,
this story.
yes, I probably have told you this before. It's a good story. My father, who normally is not very, he doesn't get spooked easy. He's not one to jump to conclusions. But he got pretty like weirded out by just the vibe of the Catskills. I've actually always wanted to film there, in fact, because I think it is a very moody, atmospheric place. There are not a whole lot of people around. It's a very like out in the middle of nowhere, out in the sticks, kind of area. So my family and I stayed at a bed and breakfast there, a very old building, right? I'm sure you can see where this is going. So yeah, it was an old building. The incident in question happened on one night. We went to bed. I was sleeping on a cot near the wall, and I remember overhearing voices coming from the other room, the next door. We thought they were just, like a group of people being a little loud, late at night. It was pretty late, but, nothing crazy, maybe like 11 o'clock, maybe midnight. So they were being loud. Then we also, late in the middle of the night, and this is at like 3, 4 a.m., I remember, because everyone woke up to this sound, was the sound of running water in the room over, like a shower or, other,
A bathtub.
like a bathtub or
Right.
something like that. And also like the pipes rumbling in the wall, in fact. So then anyway, we just thought, wow, what a bunch of rude people, just being really loud, and also the pipes in this place suck, like I would rate it poorly on Yelp or
Specifically for those
TripAdvisor, although that didn't exist at the time. So anyway, at a bed and breakfast, for those of you listening at home that might not have stayed at such a place before, a lot of times you will eat.
We raised our hands just so you know.
And I nodded. A lot of times those places you will eat breakfast with the owner of the establishment. It's very awkward. It's a little weird. I wouldn't recommend it generally. No, especially if the owner is kind of a weirdo.
Right.
But
Or if you just don't like people.
True. Yeah. There's that.
You
But
also share like living quarters.
Yes.
Yeah.
Bathroom and,
yes, you do. Yes, and also you're sitting with other guests at the table,
So
like
weird.
with the owner.
So it's like staying at your aunt's house.
Correct.
But with a bunch of boarding
Yeah.
But
people.
with but with strangers.
No thanks.
That's not always the case. Sometimes they'll have like breakfast time
It's like, hey,
where they'll
Arnold.
they'll like set out breakfast for people, and then you can kind of come and get it as you want. Sometimes
I
mean,
still
it's-
feel like there's an expected like amount of
there is some
conversation,
interaction.
and
There
I'm
is
not-
some interaction on
that's
some
weird.
level.
It's like, hey, Arnold.
That's awful.
Yeah, right. Yeah, like a boarding
I
house.
don't like that.
It's a little similar. So anyway, where the fuck was I going with that? Oh yeah, so then we're sitting with the owner of the establishment, but we were the only ones at the table. So we thought, that's interesting. Where's that other group of people that were staying right next door to us? And then, of course, are you ready for it? Are you
I'm
ready?
ready.
Ready
I'm
for
ready.
the creepypasta ending.
Yep. The owner said no one was staying
What?
there.
Oh.
Yeah, so
Spooky.
mhm. So then we said, oh, well, that's weird. And she said, oh, yeah, this place is haunted. Just very, very nonchalant. Yeah, very nonchalant. And then she went on to describe her own paranormal experiences. She was saying, like, sometimes the, like, doors will shut on their own. One time, like a light came on when she was walking towards the building. All this really, like, creepy, weird stuff. One time someone was walking up the stairs, and they claimed that someone was tugging on their shirt, like, trying to hold them back from, like,
Yeah.
walking up the stairs. Some kind of, like, spooky poltergeist behavior or something. Keep in mind, this is the owner of the building saying this to us. Not really the most, like, warm and inviting thing to be hearing. Like, I'm like, well, I'm not very surprised that we're the only people staying here. Like,
Right.
you fucking
See,
lunatic.
if she had waited 10 years, though, that's all anybody wants to do now is go and hang out at a haunted hotel.
True.
That's
So
true.
maybe she was setting it up. She had some insider secrets, knowing that Yelp was coming
Yeah.
and TripAdvisor, that
She's got
be
some
the
insight.
haunted. Yeah.
She's like 10 years from now, it's going to be the
Second
hit
sight.
location
She's
in the
a
Catskills.
Yeah, I mean, like, she definitely
Huh.
can market that now.
Yeah.
But so that was, again, like, a lot of the details of that were foggy because I was young at the time. But I do generally remember that, and I remember that conversation with the owner, with the proprietor of the building,
Strange.
which was absolutely bizarre.
Yeah. The
Very,
fact that she
very
even
weird.
mentioned that.
Yeah.
Haunted, maybe going into detail.
Yeah.
She really went into detail.
Didn't know how
That was
to
the
run a
topic
business.
of conversation
That
for the
is very
entire
strange.
breakfast.
Wow.
Did your parents believe it?
Bizarre.
Yes, my mother is a rather what's the word? Just
Spiritual?
like
Superstitious?
spiritual. Yeah, I'll say spiritual person. So yeah, yeah. And my dad was kind of just like, all right. I don't know what he thought about it, but I remember it was strange. In retrospect, I don't know what the fuck it was, but
Picture your dad being like, okay.
yeah, but it was it was all right.
All right. Oh, is it my turn?
Vin,
Yeah.
it's your turn. We
Being
want to
looked
hear
at.
your story
Let me
about
take
All
a-
eyes are on
this
you.
room
of
we're
water.
staying in right now.
You ruined my twist.
Sorry.
okay.
The scariest part
So,
is that room was
my
this
story
one.
here. My story is a long-spanning story, a series of connected coincidences that could be perceived or interpreted as paranormal.
Okay.
Let's take a trip back to about 4 years old. Now, just to preface,
Right.
this happened partially in the house we are currently in, and
Yeah.
partially in the house I lived in as a young child.
Right.
So this house that I've lived in I lived from about 5 or 6 to 19, and the house from birth to that age. So I am about 5 years old. It is bedtime. I'm laying in my bed. I believe at this point I had bunk beds. It was only me in the room, though. My brother was either born and in a crib or just not born yet.
Prenatal.
Yes. So they were getting ready to have a second person in that bunk. So I'm asleep, and I was in the bottom bunk because remember falling. I always fell asleep to there was a Simba or something. I had a stuffed animal stuffed up in the top there, between the boards. So I fell asleep, and then I remember waking up in the middle of the night. It's dark. I look out into the archway, like the doorway, and my parents must have been in the other room because I could hear the TV on, I could see the lights on, and then there was a figure, which I thought at the time was my dad. It was a shadow. He looked kind of hunched over. He was standing, not
Full body apparition.
Yes.
Is that what's going on?
So,
All right.
but at this point, I couldn't move, and I felt like I couldn't breathe. So, 5-year-old me thought, oh, it's my dad walking into the other room. Once I can move again, I'll just go ask my dad what he was doing. Because I had seen him, he stood in my doorway for a minute and then left and went into his room. So, once I regained my motion, which didn't really freak me out all as much as my dad standing in the
Were you
doorway.
having sleep paralysis
Yes,
at 5 years old?
I believe so. So I went to his room, looked in, and there was nothing.
Right.
So I looked over to the couch, and they were both just sitting there. And I said, Dad, what were you doing in there? He goes on to tell me I was not doing anything. I was not there. Okay. As an adult now, I think sleep paralysis.
Right.
No big deal.
You have hallucinations during that. It's not.
Couple this, though, with some other stories that I had always been told as a child and that I remember some of later on in life. Ever since I was a child, my toys would go off. The electronic ones.
That happened to me as well.
Yeah. There would be music coming from them. They'd be turned on. One in particular, I remember in this home, I had a Godzilla toy.
Okay.
And it would go off all the time. And then we moved it to the basement.
Yeah.
And my family would be down here doing things, and it wouldn't go off. And I'd come downstairs, and it would start going off. To the point where it would, they'd leave, I'd come down, go off, go up, it would stop.
Right.
Sort of stuff.
Interesting.
So, a couple years pass after that. By that point, we're here. I'm about 9 or 10 years old. I am with my brother. We have some of those short-range walkie-talkies, like toy walkie-talkies. They're nothing crazy.
Yeah.
And we're just playing hide-and-seek in the house, which is a horror scene if I've ever spoken one. And I go upstairs into my mom's room, and my mom and dad's room has a master bath and a master closet. So I thought perfect hiding spot, like under the bed and the shower, all that stuff. And as I walk through the threshold into their master bath, I flick on the light, and I hear a whispering little girl's voice. And she says specifically, "Do not go through the door." Now, my hand is in the other room, and I'm not yet in there. And I go, huh? As I put my first foot down, and she goes, "No, I told you not to go through the door." I immediately stop everything that I'm doing, and I walk out screaming. I run out screaming.
Right.
And I run downstairs, and I go, "Mom and Dad, there's somebody on the other line." Now, at this point, I am scared, but I also, I'm thinking that there's a little girl in our house.
Right.
So they grab my brother's walkie-talkie. They go upstairs and say, "Mom, there's someone I think needs help." My mom and dad come upstairs. They go, "Okay, let's listen." They hear it too, and then they immediately tell me to leave. Okay, fine, sure. Maybe they did hear something. So I leave, and I hear them in there, and they shut the door and lock it. And for me, that's the end of the story. Until 7-8 months ago, I'm having dinner at their house here, with my dad telling a story, and I said, "Do you remember it?" For whatever reason, it triggered the memory of that walkie-talkie incident. I said, "Oh, remember that time that little girl came on the walkie-talkie?" And the official story, the official press release was, "Oh, it was a girl. She was messing with you. They called her home to dinner." We heard her dad say, "Come back home for dinner." That's what I had thought for my entire life, until my dad goes, "That's not what happened." And he goes on to tell me that what had actually happened was he heard this girl's voice with my mom, and then it turned into a male voice. So there was a girl and a male, and the male was saying just some wicked shit, like disgusting, awful stuff. And they're like, "All right, goodbye." So they kind of left that as it was, and went on with their life. But my dad would come downstairs with my cousin, and they turned it on one time just for shits and giggles. It was just to be like, haha. My dad was showing my cousin this creepy walkie-talkie. Check this thing out. And they turned it on down here in this room that we're in, and they heard the voice again. And the voice was, according to my father, was describing to them things about the house. Like our house. And was saying things about my mom and what she looked like and like what the ghost thinks and
Do you have an attic person?
it could be. It could be, but that was my dad filled in the gap with that story just recently, and I thought that was funny because it was creepy enough when I was a kid.
Yeah.
Hearing the girl's voice, and then knowing that it wasn't just a girl, there was a man, and he was heard more than once. Even if it's not something paranormal, that means that someone was watching our home
Several
at some
years
point.
later, too.
No, this was all within the same time span.
Oh, okay.
I was only
okay.
told.
See,
I
that's-
apologize.
I
Yes,
thought
All
you
right,
meant-
let me walk back.
misunderstood also.
There was an official press release from my
Right.
parents that said that it was nothing.
Family press release.
My dad and mom did hear something that night, but had told me that
Right.
it was nothing.
Right.
And my dad had heard stuff after that for a couple months after.
Okay.
When he
Still
went
creepy as
downstairs.
fuck.
Yeah, that's still very creepy, although
Yes.
I thought that this happened
Oh,
years
no.
later.
Yeah.
No,
like
no.
20 years later.
Yeah,
Whatever,
I thought you
and
meant
it's
this was like within a
holy
couple
shit.
of the last few years or
that
so.
would be horrifying. No.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah, I thought that was
No,
what you
it
were
spanned
describing.
years in that the first incident was the little
Right.
sleep paralysis, and then toys. Oh, I missed a whole plot point.
Oh, man.
This
come on,
this
man.
master bathroom was important for a very specific reason, in that a year before the walkie-talkie or so, my uncle was visiting from Arizona, and we were watching. I think it was New Year's Eve or something. We were watching one of
Right.
those lame, everybody watches sort of
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
And we're sitting downstairs. It's him, his wife, and my family.
Down
All of a sudden-
here.
No, this
Oh,
is
okay. Up
in
to
the
the
living
middle
room.
floor.
Yes, in the living room. And everybody's together. At this point, we do have animals. We have 2 cats and a dog.
Right.
But it's just for, so that everyone knows. We're sitting. We're hanging out. All of a sudden, we hear what sounds like a jackhammer. But it's like right outside in our street.
Yeah.
We're like, what the fuck? So we get out. We look outside, nothing. We look out back, nothing. There's always a lot of work going on in our woods. So we even called the township. And we were going to complain because who the hell's doing road
Oh,
work?
yeah,
It was like
right.
8 or 9 at night. Who's
Right.
doing road work? What was this approved to be done this late at night? And they're like, "There's nothing going on. What are you talking about?"
Right.
So we start looking inside the house. We go around, nothing in the middle floor. We start going upstairs. It's getting louder. So we go in. Eventually, we find in my mom's master bathroom, someone had plugged in and turned on her hairdryer, but it was on the floor. It didn't wiggle its way to the floor because we would have heard the.
Right.
It
was just
started
on
the
the
floor.
floor.
We were all together. So this master bathroom has a lot of strange things going on in there. Again, all coincidences, I'm sure, but when
Very
you
odd.
when you tell them in a tale like format, I think it sounds pretty creepy.
I agree. I applaud your
Thank
efforts
you.
there.
Thank you.
I think that especially that walkie-talkie incident, I think regardless paranormal or not, that is
Yeah.
some freaky ass
Yes,
shit
there's
going
something-
on. Whatever,
wrong.
Whatever that was.
That is definitely unsettling.
Yeah, that's totally bizarre.
First I thought you were saying that your parents had kidnapped a young girl and were like trying to hide it from you.
That would be pretty cool. That would be more.
Well,
interesting.
hey, that's always an option. I
That is
suppose.
an option.
That's true because
Yeah.
both,
didn't hear the
both
man's
times
voice.
it was from my father
And
who
you,
said
you
these
didn't hear the
things.
man's voice.
So he could have been
That's
covering
true.
himself up.
Yeah.
That's
Oh.
true.
He could have been covering his tracks twice.
Oh man,
Your parents are hiding.
Sorry, Dad. Sorry, Mom.
She's still up there.
accusing
The girl or
Yeah,
my
the
mom?
girl. The girl.
Oh yeah, I'm sure.
And your mom.
She's
too.
a woman now. I'm assuming. Is she alive?
True.
I don't know.
Or is she dead? Is she a ghost? Is she a
Maybe she's
ghoul?
just an
Should be
attic
more
person. Maybe you
respectful.
just have an attic person.
It sort of sounds like you're saying addict.
Maybe you have an addict in your
addict.
house. No,
The story's
you know what I'm
getting
talking about,
sadder and
right?
sadder.
You know what I'm talking? Yeah, like
Yeah.
that guy who had like
Who
the
set up
woman
the
like in his
camera?
crawl space.
And she'd come out and take food.
You saw that. You know,
Yes, I have
It's
heard
so
that
that's
story.
creepy as hell.
That is a very bizarre story.
That is a fantastic one.
All right, I'm gonna.
Oh yeah, you have a little.
I have a
Extra.
little story that I will share.
Please do.
I'm gonna start off with the punchline. I adopted my cat from an axe murderer.
Love it. I love
All
this
right,
story.
so
Start at 100.
yep. So I'm sure you're wondering, what the heck? So what happened was, in my neighborhood one day we saw this stray cat that was wandering around. We felt bad for the poor thing. So my family. This was also when I was probably around 12 years old. These are stories
years.
from yeah. from a while ago.
Hammerberg years.
Yeah, from a while ago. So anyway, we decide to adopt this poor stray cat. He's very skittish. He's very antisocial. He does not like being around people generally. Very aggressive. Like, he would hiss if you try to touch him. And we were like, man, what a very unfriendly cat. But still, we felt bad for him, so we wanted to take care of him. We did. Eventually, he kind of warmed up to us. But then we find out where this cat came from. So apparently, the cat's former owners, who lived in my neighborhood, were murdered. It was a grandmother and her daughter, and they were killed by the granddaughter's boyfriend, who this whole situation was made publicly known because he himself, the murderer, called the police on himself because he was in some kind of drugged stupor when he committed the murder. So he was sitting on the front lawn of their home drenched in blood and calling the police saying, I don't know what the hell happened. I'm covered in blood. I need help. And so they sure helped him, all right,
right into a cell.
To a cop car.
Right into jail. Yeah, so apparently he murdered the family. Mm-hmm. He chopped them up into pieces. This is some Shining shit going on. Yeah.
Was he on anything?
Yes. He was on, I don't know the specific drugs. Okay. I believe he was hallucinating. He said in retrospect that he was he thought he was going into hell, that the home was the gates of hell, and that they appeared to him as demons. And so he was so frightened by them that he killed them.
He went full demon
with an
slayer.
axe.
Yeah,
right.
He went Doomslayer on him.
Yes,
nice.
He did.
Nice.
And apparently he thought that our cat, whose name is Jack, by the way, was some kind of little demonic gremlin
He was
or something.
Cerberus, the Hound of Hell.
Right. So he was chasing him about the home with an axe, or I believe some kind of large tool. I think it was an axe. Yeah.
And that makes for good dramatic effect too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's assume it was an axe. So that's the origin of that cat, and I do not blame him for being rather antisocial, considering his prior interaction with humans is a literal bloodbath.
And cats don't like bads to begin with, so for it to be blood is a whole...
That's true.
Probably not pleasant.
We apologize.
Lock the dead, Vin. Okay.
We apologize to the dead.
And the attic woman.
Yeah, she can hear us.
If you can hear us right now, we apologize. She
just falls through the...
We saved her at least.
There she is. Wow.
Hey, what's up?
Hey, how's it going?
Oh my God.
Crash.
All right. Are there any more lingering stories? I'm all out. I'm fresh out of stories.
I think
I'm plumb out of stories myself.
Well, in that
I don't know any
case-
directly that happened to me. I know some things that happened to other people.
Well,
but
this is
those
us.
don't count.
This is us. We don't. Everybody has the story from a friend of a friend of a friend of a twice removed cousin. Yeah. All right. Well, then in that case, may I close this tale from the Midnight Society?
I'd say yeah.
Absolutely.
Put out throw the special dust into the fire.
Yes. We actually have some social media. If you guys liked this and our previous and are looking forward to our future podcasts,
Like, comment, subscribe.
Yes. Chris, what is our Twitter?
Our Twitter is Real Ritterhaus, at Real Ritterhaus.
Lee, what is our Facebook?
Ritterhaus Productions.
You got it.
Yeah.
We also...
I think
That's it. That's all we have.
That's it.
Yeah. That's it.
If you would like to reach us, you can reach us at either one of those handles. We're looking forward to any comments, questions, suggestions.
Suggestions.
Yeah, suggestions.
Shoot us
are
an
good.
email.
If you want to hear us blather on about something for roughly 30 minutes, give us some topic ideas.
Shoot us an email at ritterhausproductions@gmail.com.
Yes,
there you go.
That works. I heard a thing.
You heard the ghost.
All
It's
right.
the lady.
With
It's the
that,
girl.
Good night, everybody.
Good night.